Welcome to the Stoic Responder Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Healy. As a special agent who spent more than 15 years conducting large-scale fraud, money laundering, and public corruption investigations, Stoic philosophy provided a mindset edge that became the foundation of my professional success. My mission today is to share those same ancient mindset lessons with you so that you can turn obstacles into opportunities and adversity into advantage. Time to muster up.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Stoic Responder Podcast. This is episode 68. I'm your host, Christopher Healy. This one is called Master or Slave. And before we get started with a quote, again from Epictetus, I think that's 3 for 3 with Epictetus this week. Yeah, I think it's 3 for 3. Well, there's worse people to quote. Before we get started, let me tell you about my favorite 501c3, the Overwatch Collective. It's a nonprofit and podcast funding therapy sessions and supporting mental health initiatives for our first responders, our veterans, and their families. Motto over at the Overwatch Collective is one more is one less. I take that to heart because one more individual that we can provide services to is one less statistic. Folks, all month long, we were talking about suicide prevention awareness. The folks at the Overwatch Collective are talking about that day in, day out, all year long, and not only talking about it, but doing something about it. So if you can provide some support to the Overwatch Collective, please do so. Check them out at theoverwatchcollective.com. Make a donation. Buy some of their sweet t-shirts, sweatshirts, cups, mugs, you name it, they've got it. All of it goes to support their very important mission of providing therapy services to our law enforcement, our first responders, and their families. I also want to give a shout out to the Blue Badge Coffee Company. The mission of Blue Badge is not only to provide customers with the best, highest quality premium coffee their money can buy, but to also take a portion of each and every sale and donate it to law enforcement agencies around our great nation to assist them in funding or maintaining peer support and wellness programs for their officers. These programs are crucial for the physical and mental well-being of our hardworking law enforcement officers. We want to make sure that they're not getting burned out on the job, and coffee helps, but having help for their peer support programs is even more important. So support their mission, if you would, by checking out bluebadgecoffee.com. Oh yeah, and get yourself some great coffee while you're over there. All right, as I said, I'll start you out with a Epictetus quote. This one is, any person capable of angering you becomes your master. He can anger you only when you permit yourself to be disturbed by him. This is such a great concept to talk about and such a hard concept to practice. You see, we have sovereignty over just a few things in this life, our choices, our attitude, our actions, and our reactions. But we are so quick to give away that sovereignty. The moment our fragile little egos are threatened by a perceived slight or an insult. You ever been on like Twitter and you like post something, or on Facebook and you post something and somebody jumps into your DMs and, makes a little comment? Like, you know how hard it is to not like just spend the next 10 minutes like piling on that individual and blah, 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 blah. You would say that or whatever, like getting in a fight with a complete stranger online. Every time I feel tempted to do that, I recognize and realize it's my ego reacting. And when I let that anger rise or boil over, or I react to something silly or stupid and give my attention to that person or individual or thing, that I'm surrendering my agency and empowering my tormentor. I'm making, in other words, that person my master, and I'm a slave to my emotions. Now that's a choice. It's a choice we make, but it doesn't have to be that way. Because when we acknowledge that others cannot control our emotional responses without our consent, we liberate ourselves from the shackles of that external influence. We reclaim that agency over our inner lives. Think about that again. We have to acknowledge, we have to say it out loud sometimes, that others cannot control our emotional responses without our consent. We allow them to. They can't control our emotional responses without our consent. So we can liberate ourselves from that by not caring, by not allowing others' external influence over our emotional responses. We don't allow them to rule our inner lives. It's incredibly empowering and incredibly difficult to do. All of us struggle with this. We all struggle with this. We all struggle with the emotional response when somebody says, you look ugly, or that shirt's ugly, or whatever else. Like, I could take this in a different direction. I could take this in the direction where my wife and I talk a lot about how my child who's on the spectrum, our little girl, is the happiest person that we know. Maybe the most well-adjusted person that we know, because she truly does not care what anyone thinks about her at all. At all. She just goes about her life doing things that make her laugh and smile and make her happy. She has no concern if somebody thinks that she looks silly, if she's dancing or if she's doing something, we're at Disney World and she's acting in a way that, if I was acting that way, I would be super self-conscious. She doesn't care, not a care in the world. It's incredibly empowering. It makes me like recognize the power of this advice whenever I see her doing something like that. She truly doesn't care. She's completely liberated herself from feeling the need to even acknowledge that somebody else might have emotional control over her. She's liberated herself from the shackles of external influence. She is full agency over her own happiness. And there's a lesson in that for each and every one of us, because our reality is full of interpersonal conflicts. It's full of disagreements. It's full of frustrations. And it's super easy for us to fall into that trap of allowing others to dictate our emotional state. But the power to control our emotions, it ultimately still lies within ourselves. As it does with my daughter, it does with you. And in the face of provocations or injustices, we can choose, instead of responding with anger, with irritation, with rage tweeting or texting somebody back how mad we are, we can choose to respond with empathy, with compassion, with understanding, or to not react at all. Rather than anger or hostility, we could just not react at all. How many times, and this happened last week, I'm not throwing my wife under the bus when I say this, we were going back and forth on text message, and I said something that I intended to be funny, but because you can't infer, you can only read the words, you can't infer tone of voice, you can't infer anything in a text message. When I came home, I wasn't expecting her to be upset about the thing that I wrote, because I meant it tongue in cheek. And she confronted me and was like, "Hey, can you give me some grace, yada, yada, yada." And I was like, "Oh, goodness, you read that in a way that I did not intend. I'm sorry. That's my fault. I meant that lighthearted and tongue-in-cheek. I wasn't trying to put you down. I wasn't trying to be rude. I was being silly." And you can't read that in the text message, right? Now, that could have blown up. And how many of you have experienced this, where you text somebody something that you think is funny or whatever, they read it the wrong way, they fire back, maybe you fire back, all of a sudden you're having an argument with someone because people just did not communicate well. You've got an interpersonal conflict, a disagreement, because in the face of a provocation or a perceived provocation, you chose to respond with anger or hostility instead of empathy or compassion or understanding, or just leaving it alone until you had better clarification. You see, we control all of that, and we do this all the time, every day. So my advice to you is transcend. Don't be a passive recipient of others' actions. Instead, assert your own agency. Be a master of your own emotional landscape. Don't allow somebody's words or somebody's comment or somebody's attitude or somebody's opinion to influence your emotions. If you do, again, you become not the master of your own life, but you become a slave to someone else. You become a slave to your emotions. You give away your agency, you give away your power by allowing others to impact and affect your emotional state. And I promise you, you don't think it is, but it fully is a choice. It is a choice, and you can choose not to allow that to happen. So let me leave you with a quote here, a journal prompt. Get out your Big Chief notebook, get out your pen and paper, write this one down. Who am I making my master when I permit myself to be disturbed by him? This could be your boss. This could be your husband. This could be your wife. This could be your friend. This could be that guy that you went to high school or college with who makes chirpy comments and that bothers you, the frenemy. This is whoever it is. Now, you probably have someone in mind right now. I know I do. Who am I allowing to make my master when I permit myself to be disturbed by him or her? Write that person's name down. Be aware of it. Speak it into existence, and then start making better choices instead of allowing that person to, instead of empowering your tormentor, take away that power, regain your agency, become more in control of your own emotions. That's what I got for you today, folks. One more episode this week. In the meanwhile, if you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by picking up a copy of my book, In Valor, 365 Stoic Meditations for First Responders. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, anywhere you get your books. For those that don't know, it's a great resource for law enforcement and first responders who want to practice this philosophy daily. Again, this is intended to be a practiced philosophy. It's going to give you some quotes, some contextualization. It's going to be directly relatable to what you do on a daily basis. It's also going to give you journal prompts like the one I just gave you, or action items to help you contextualize and practice and integrate these lessons. Number 2, you can subscribe to the Stoic Responder on Substack at thestoicresponder.substack.com for free. That page, you're going to be able to get these podcasts delivered directly to your email 4 times a week, plus my weekly newsletter with Stoic leadership and personal development tips. And finally, the best way and easiest way for you to to support this podcast is to like, share, and subscribe so that others can learn about what we're doing here and can get some of these great mindset tips in their life as well. As I said, one more episode this week. We'll see you on Friday. Until next time, folks, thanks so much. You are out of roll.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, rate, and share this podcast so that we can spread the benefits of Stoicism to other first responders. It will only take you a few moments, but it can help us tremendously. Until next time, out of roll.